Two teenage boys killed their teacher in Iowa last year, and they recently went to court. And I have not really seen any big media coverage of this case, probably because it doesn't really fit the narrative that many people want. You know, trying to focus on crimes committed by black people, or downplaying and misrepresenting those done by white people. You know, typical fare. But bear in mind, the only times they report on stuff like George Floyd is when there's such a backlash, it puts pressure on them to do so. But even then, so many of them are quick to either trying to downplay it or, in that case, claim George Floyd died from his own actions rather than, you know, the pigs brutalizing him. But I digress. So, last year in November, these two little monsters, Jeremy Goodale and Willard Miller, they got themselves in quite a bind. You see, poor little Willard Miller wanted desperately to go on a study abroad program. It meant the world to him. But his dreams were absolutely shattered when he found out he was no longer eligible to partake in the study abroad program because his Spanish teacher, Mrs. Nohema Graber, gave Miller a bad grade. The poor baby. So that's when this little demon began plotting. He convinced his friend and partner in crime, Jeremy Goodale, this little punk with the clown lips here, to partake in his plan. And according to Jeremy, he said he agreed to do it because he didn't want to be called a pussy. So they stalked her to a park she frequented, which in a way made me think of, Jeffrey Dahmer, who stalked and planned out his assault of a jogger. But, they find Goodale. They stalked her to a park she frequented, which in a way made me think of Jeffrey Dahmer, who stalked and planned his assault of a jogger. But they find her there, Goodale distracts her, and then Miller comes in from behind and proceeds to brutally beat her with a baseball bat. And they had all this planned out. They got a hold of a wheelbarrow and a tarp, and used both of these to carry her off to some railroad tracks, and covered her up with both of them. On top of this, her body was found completely nude. So, at some point, these monsters stripped her down too. I can't imagine how wicked you need to be to do something like that. So understand, this was a planned murder. It wasn't a case of Miller getting mad and lashing out at her in the moment when he found out about his grade. No, he grabbed an accomplice, the two stalked and surveyed their teacher to figure out her typical movements. They made up a plan and got the tools needed to do it, and then they did it. And all of this over a bad grade, because Miller thought he deserved to go on this study abroad program. I'm sorry, buddy, your grades weren't good enough. You didn't make the cut, so you don't get to be a part of the team. It just reeks of privilege that he thought he deserved to go on this program despite his grades, and then to take his teacher's life over it. His buddy Goodale acted to lull Nohema into a false sense of security, and when Miller began beating her, he'd encourage him to keep doing it, more and more, to make sure she was dead. But Goodale was also the one to deliver the final blows as they were carrying her around. So prosecutors made note in this case that neither Miller or Goodale expressed any sort of remorse, not to the family, not to law enforcement, not to the community. Goodale feigned remorse when it came to his court appearance this year, and then he had the audacity to tell the court, with the family of the victim present, that he hoped something good can come out of this tragedy. Like, where do you get off? You took not only Nohema from her family, but are responsible for the death of her husband as well. Her husband, Paul, had cancer, and she was his primary caregiver. But following her murder, his condition worsened, no doubt from the combination of grief and being deprived of the woman who was both monitoring and caring for him as he struggled with his health. So now their kids are without either parent. The community that loved Nohema is deprived of her as well. The only good that can come from this is justice, but even then that won't bring either of their lives back. That won't fill the void in the lives of all those that loved Nohema and Paul. Goodale was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years, and as for his partner Miller, well, he won't be traveling abroad anytime soon, let's say. The only place he'll be traveling to is a jail cell, as he was also sentenced back in July with a similar sentence of life with no chance of parole until 35 years. I'm sure each of them will try to appeal or whatever to get out early, but, since they're a bunch of white kids, let's be honest, they may get it. But I pray that they don't. I pray that they rot in jail. As I said at the start of this video, you probably won't hear anything about this case or any like it, because we always try to downplay or obscure the crimes that white people do. Like how you see them quick to bring up mental health or bullying when you have all these little white kids killing people in schools and stores and all that. Our country has a myth it needs to keep alive, right? That's all for now, though. Until next time, stay safe out there.